Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, wedding memories. We last left Priscilla and Elvis as they were ending a press conference in the banquet room directly after they were married in a 10-minute ceremony inside of Milton Prell's private living quarters, the executive suite at the Aladdin Hotel, on May 1st, 1967. And that's what we're going to return to now. But first, we've got to get to that wedding. And we're going to go to it the same way that Elvis did, aboard Frank Sinatra's Learjet named Christina, that Elvis boarded at midnight in order to fly to Las Vegas so that he could be married on this day. This song also talks about Red West, who went to Las Vegas but wasn't invited to the wedding ceremony. And I call this song Christina at Midnight. It's brand new.
Slicked out the back with a bullhorn hop over stucco walls where the flashbulbs stop. Joni's got curlers, Joe's got the cash, Danny K's in the cockpit, burning jet fuel fast. Sinatra's bird, she's purring like a prayer. Christina's wings cut the desert air. Red's not on the list, he's pacing the floor, while the collar's got the press in a ballroom wall. Mona's got a sin and a Polaroid grin, but the ring's in a case with the diamonds grinning in. $15 for a license and a lie, while the best men shine with a bullseye tie. Blinded by the flight, wrapped up like a vow in the Vegas night. Blinded by the flight, when a heartbreak hits in the morning light. Oh, we were flying on a secret stream to a chapel dream, but the brother got burned by the wedding machine. Palm Springs whispers, Aladdin's got the suit, but the real show's hidden in a velvet beat. Mama's flown in, Daddy's eyes are wide, while the Memphis boys are split on the right. Livich opens up his velvet chest, bullhead complex diamonds in the west. But Red's got a wound that won't sit still, he's shouting down love from the windowsill. Color's got a script and a phantom plan, he's dealing out silence with a sleight of hand. You got too many, he says with a grin, let go of the love if you wanna win. Blinded by the flight, wrapped up like a vow in the Vegas night. Blinded by the flight, when the heartbreak hits you in the morning light. Oh, we were flying on a secret stream to a chapel dream, but the brother got burned by the wedding machine. Christina's wheels kissed the tarmac clean, and the ring was slipped before the world had seen. But love, oh love, it don't run on time, it breaks in the silence, not the headline.
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we're hearing the echoes of wedding memories. Now I got a bad thunderstorm on this end, so if the broadcast suddenly ends, you'll know the electricity here went out. But we'll continue for it as long as I can. I don't expect it to, but it's always a possibility here during these thunderstorms. We are in Las Vegas, Nevada, at the Aladdin Hotel, the press conference has just ended because the colonel said, you can't end bachelorhood without getting married. And Elvis has ended his bachelorhood by getting married. And we can see who he married right here on the screen. This is Elvis and Priscilla. I'm imagining this was taken during this press conference or immediately thereafter. And Colleen says that it's getting pretty dark where she is too at the moment. Yeah, apparently there's a lot of storms sweeping through this part of the country. We're here on the eastern seaboard. Well, I'm not really close to the seaboard, but on the eastern part of the United States. And Priscilla Presley, who we can see, she says, Mrs. Elvis Presley, for the first time, I felt accepted by my peers and the majority of the public. Now, there's another reporter in the room, other than May Mann, who we have heard talk in the past episodes many times. So if you missed one of those episodes, we've done at least 5, probably more, about the wedding itself. We got a whole series going about 1967 and the Circle G, which is really the crux of this moment of time. Because Elvis, he's just days away from getting back to the Circle G, which I believe is where his heart is. Although you can see in his face in this picture, he's also invested in this marriage, in this wedding, in this moment. And Marion says she wishes Colleen and I good luck with the weather. Just had a huge lightning strike and crack of thunder here, so hopefully that means it's about to pass over. That's what it usually means here. You get one bad strike and then it kind of all rolls over. And this other reporter who was in the room, and he was talking to May Mann after this press conference broke up, he said to her, or at least this is what she said, he said to her, he said, you can plainly see who wears the pants in this marriage. I don't think they made that kind of woman anymore. She lets her husband do the talking for both of them. So this reporter says that Priscilla was very quiet during this conference, and she let Elvis do the talking for both of them. That I didn't think they made that kind of woman anymore. Marty Lacker, he says, then the colonel, in his way, let it be known that the session was over. And that was when he said, can't end bachelorhood without getting married. Priscilla Presley, she says, when I read in the newspapers that I was the best kept secret in Hollywood, I felt very proud. It was good to be acknowledged. Priscilla is indicating that the press maybe didn't know about her before, and that she's seen this in the newspapers in the days following the wedding, that she was the best kept secret in Hollywood. I don't know that that's actually true. I'm fairly certain the public knew about Priscilla. I mean, certainly the fans who were hanging out at the gates knew of all the residences that Elvis lived at. So I don't know what exactly she's referring to with the best kept secret in Hollywood. But she says it. And Luann says that Sydney had thunderstorms last week. Sydney, Australia. And the weather's getting bad now. And Marty Lacker says, we left to join the others at the breakfast reception. Inside the Aladdin room were representatives from RCA, Hill and Range Publishing Company, movie studios, and other business whom the Colonel had invited. So in this picture on screen, we can see Elvis and Priscilla. They're getting ready to cut the cake. There's a couple of unidentified people behind them. There's a man with a chef's hat on next to the cake on the opposite side. I'm assuming he is the man who made this cake. There's someone right behind him. I'm assuming that some of these representatives from RCA, Hill and Range, movie studios, other businesses, or the Aladdin Hotel itself. Because I don't recognize any of them right off the bat. You can see at the top of the cake it says Priscilla at the very top layer. Now, I believe on the other layer it says Elvis. But I don't know that there's any pictures of that side because I think it was more difficult to get around to that side for whoever's taking these pictures. I'm not sure. But the few pictures that I've seen of the cake so far, I think they're all from this side. But we'll see as we go through. You can see that Elvis is looking at Priscilla and she is gazing into his eyes as they get ready to cut this cake. The chef's attention is fully on Elvis and Priscilla. The guy behind the chef with the glasses on, he might be watching Elvis and Priscilla. I'm not sure, but the other two guys are not. I don't know what they're looking at, but they are not paying attention to the main action of this picture. Oh, I noticed that one of those guys has an accordion. He is the accordion player, the man in the middle. So we've heard about the trio playing the music. That might be them right there. There's the guy with the accordion. We can barely see the accordion in between Elvis and the cake. It's a black and white picture. I didn't really notice it was an accordion until this moment. And then the man standing next to him, I'm assuming is probably one of the band players. It was a trio. That's interesting. And Luann's asking about the guy on the right with the cook's hat on. I think he made the cake. I think he works for the Aladdin. And he made this cake. Or he's the caterer who made the cake. But I kind of think he works for the Aladdin. I don't know why I think that, but... And Luann says it's weird to have a cook in your wedding photo. I think the press is taking this photo. I don't think this is one that the photographer of the wedding is taking. I think like this is staged for the press, and the press has shot this photo. And then what happens is they crop this photo and they crop that cook out of it. And you see just that other half a lot more often. In fact, they a lot of times crop right through the middle of the cake. And Colleen's saying that that cook, he's looking pretty happy. He does look pretty happy. But I bet he spent a lot of time making this cake. This is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layer cake with, it looks like some kind of hat on top with little bells. Maybe a crown? I'm not sure. But just the icing alone on it must have taken a long time. And a lot of times when you see a cake like this, some of the tiers of it are fake. They're like styrofoam and they've been iced with the icing to look like a cake. But this one's all cake. I mean, I can guarantee this one's all cake. Elvis is a rich man. This is a huge thing going on. They got 100 people here. This is all cake. And Colleen says that she had not noticed from the other pictures that Elvis's pants had the same print as his jacket. Yeah, it's like it's woven right into the fabric. And it was all one big bolt of cloth, and they had the tailor at the studio make it. But yes, in a lot of the pictures, they do look plain black. Luann says it's still ridiculous to have the cake maker in the picture. I bet he was proud, though. If I was him, I would have snuck my way into the picture. But as we look through the rest of the pictures, remember that we're looking for representatives from RCA. This is a very important company to Elvis. That's who pays him now, starting this year, or maybe it's next year, because the Colonel just negotiated the contract, but $300,000 up front against his royalties, because they know he's going to make more. They'll settle up with him at the end of the year, but the bulk of the payments, $300,000, he will have collected virtually the first day of each year. So that's an important, and in that time, that was roughly $3 million. To us today, it would feel like $3 million. So that's an important part of his annual earnings. Hill and Range Publishing Company. A lot of the songs that make it onto his albums, not exactly all of them, but a whole bunch of them come out of Hill and Range Publishing Company that controls the publishing. Now Elvis has it in a couple of other publishing companies as well, but I believe they're really being like daily managed by Hill and Range. It's like a business arrangement that gets Elvis a higher percentage of the publishing. But he not only gets paid a revenue from the records being sold by RCA, but he gets a revenue from what RCA pays to the license guys, which would be like BMI, or there's another one, but I can't remember. But wherever RCA ends up paying those licenses for this, based on the publishing, that then gets split according to the rules of publishing. And that's why they have these different companies set up. But Elvis gets more money from that. And Hill and Range gets money from it. And if Hill and Range gets money and Elvis gets money, that means the Colonel gets money. The movie studios, that's where Elvis is making his killing right now. His big money comes from the movie studios. And you gotta schmooze those guys in order to get more and more contracts. So some people would say that right now, in 1967, Elvis's movie career is starting to take a nosedive, that it has already done poorly, that he's not really being offered the kind of money that he was before. But these executives, they were very happy to come to his wedding. So that tells me they still believed he had a lot of earning potential. I don't think these people were Elvis Presley's personal friends. These were business acquaintances that the Colonel had invited. Now, a few of them may have felt like Elvis's personal friends. I think any of us would feel like that if we spent 10 minutes with him. Marty says that all the guys attended except two who stayed in their rooms. Now, Marty doesn't say who the two guys are that stay in their rooms. We kind of can guess that one was Red, although others have said he stormed out of the building, or that he kicked his door in on his hotel door and stormed out of the building, and that he's on his way back to LA. But Marty's saying two guys stayed in the room. And Marty says at the head of the table. So this press conference is now over. There was a bunch of tables lined up that they sat at for the conference. So I don't know if those have been moved around or they've moved to another table that's the head table. But there's a table for Elvis and Priscilla, obviously. This is their reception. And Elvis and Priscilla are at the head of this table. And Marty says Vernon and Dee, Major and Mrs. Beaulieu, Joe and Joni Esposito, Colonel and Mrs. Parker, George Klein, and Marty Lacker. So I guess Marty's wife is not here. And George Klein isn't married, and he hasn't brought anybody. So I guess George and Marty are kind of like dates at this head table. I'm just kidding. But they're the only two that are not with their significant other. And Marty says, to our surprise, the only celebrity invited was Red Fox. And he sat next to the Colonel at the head of the table. So Marty told us that Elvis and Priscilla were at the head of the table, and now he says it's Colonel and Red Fox. I'm assuming this means one short end of the table has Elvis and Priscilla, and the other short end of the table is the Colonel and his wife, and then Red is sitting next to them. Now, Red Fox, people may better remember from the 1970s. He was in a sitcom called Sanford and Son. He was Sanford. He had a lot of great bits in that. But before that, he was a stand-up comedian, and he did shows in Las Vegas. And here he is at Elvis Presley's wedding. This is the 1960s. There is a lot of racial tension in America. Elvis is a white man. Red Fox is a black man. People have often accused Elvis of being a racist, but here he is at his wedding, and Red Fox is there. Now, Marty says it's because the Colonel invited Red Fox, but Red Fox seemed happy to come. He seemed to want to be at Elvis's wedding, and I'm sure Elvis was happy to have him there. And why did the Colonel invite Red Fox? Well, we don't really know at this point. I don't know that we'll ever know, but it kind of feels like maybe Elvis said something. Hey, we're going to be in Vegas. Is Red Fox there? I don't know that. Wild speculation on my part. Here's some of the newspaper clips that are going to come out over the next several days, including the hometown paper, the Memphis Press Scimitar. That's going to tell the world about Elvis and Priscilla getting married. And Marion says the cake knife looks very special, and maybe specifically for weddings or for Elvis. You know, usually, at least in the US, from weddings that I know, now, I don't know that this was true for the 60s, but I would imagine, because I think the traditions that I was seeing in the late 70s and throughout the 80s and 90s were, they came directly out of the 60s, is what I think, and actually directly out of the 50s. I think things were different before the 50s, because it wasn't as readily available to get a lot of stuff. But there's usually a specific knife, and it's kind of like a ladle, but like a sharp, or not a ladle, but a spatula, like a sharp triangular spatula. It's usually made out of silver. Of course, it might be made out of something that just looks like silver, but typically it's a piece that is then kept as a keepsake. So I would imagine that knife still exists somewhere. I don't know where. Might be at Graceland. Might be with that wedding dress of Priscilla's we talked about in a previous video. But it would be very common for that to be a one-time use knife only for this wedding. And Luann says that she would not have the cake maker standing next to her at any point during the wedding, even if the cake is there. And Marion says that she too would have friends and family there and not the cake maker. I would probably agree with that, but think how great that cake maker felt. And that was just like Elvis, right? To make the people who made the moment happen, to give them their moment in the spotlight. And I don't know that he gave that man the moment in the spotlight, but that man got it. And Luann says that to have the cake maker next to you looks like a commercial. I do agree with that. It does look like a commercial. It advertises for him to make your wedding cake. And Colleen's asking what happened to Joe Esposito. He's sitting at this front table with his wife, who is the matron of honor. He was the best man or the co-best man. And Marion said that she didn't know that wedding knives exist. Yeah, I think it's like in America, it's really common. I would say, yeah, absolutely. Every wedding I've ever been to, there was a special knife. My mother used to make wedding cakes, and then she switched and started to make wedding dresses. So I went to a lot of weddings. Not that I attended, but that I helped set up and stuff. And I was really no help at all. It was really worse to take me than just to go by yourself. But I was a terrible kid, right? Anyway, I do remember those knives. There was always a special one. Now, the pieces that would make the cake look special, like a lot of times they put a fountain underneath it. That was owned by my mother or whoever made the cake, and they would recollect that at the end of the wedding. So those were typically used over and over, but the knife itself, I think, was usually a memento. And Mayman, the reporter that's at this wedding, she says those joining the bride and groom at the head table. And of course, Mayman has no reason to lie about this. She's getting paid to report these facts correctly. That doesn't mean she did report the facts correctly, but she has a motivation to be correct in the facts. And her account is from the time period and not remembered many years later. Mayman says that those joining the bride and groom at the head table included Mr. and Mrs. Billy Smith. And I am looking back up at Marty's recollection, and he did not remember that Mr. and Mrs. Billy Smith, Billy and Joe Smith, were at that head table. So Mays told us something a little different. She says that other people that were at this table, Mr. and Mrs. Joe Esposito, Colonel and Mrs. Tom Parker, Mr. and Mrs. Vernon Presley. So we do all of those from Marty's account. Mayman says Mr. and Mrs. Gamble. Well, that would be Patsy and her husband, Gigi Gamble. It's Patsy Presley, Elvis's double first cousin. She's the daughter of Vester and Cletus. So if you saw the first episode today in my morning show, well, my morning, I don't know what time it is on your end of the world when you see the show. But if you saw that one, I featured a Bible in it that had been given to Elvis by Vester and Cletus. And their daughter is here at the wedding with her husband. Hello, TT ASMR. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate seeing you here. And Luann says that the wedding knife could be in Elvis's display cabinet in Graceland's dining room. That's a good thought, Luann. It might be there. And Mayman goes on. And she says, other people at this table, Colonel and Mrs. Joseph Blue. And that's Priscilla's parents. And don't hate me for the pronunciation. I'm probably terrible at it. Mary and I told the story that I tried to get it right from what you've told me, but I just can't ever do it. And Priscilla's sister, Michelle, and her brother, Don. So Marty did not mention that Michelle or Don were also at this table. So this table's a lot bigger than Marty led us to believe. But Marty was remembering years and years later. Mayman was there in the moment. But what else is interesting is that May, she does not mention George Klein. But again, George Klein is not there with anybody. And other than Michelle and Don, who are the only other two people who are not attached to someone, but because they're brother and sister, they kind of make their own couple in people's minds, I would think. So somebody like May Mann, if she was able to start noting things down, might have made it easier for her to remember. May have just totally missed George. But she also doesn't mention Marty Lacker. Now, Marty says he and George were at this table. I absolutely believe George was at the table. I have to believe Marty was too, because he was the co-best man. But it's just very amusing that May Mann didn't notice the co-best man. And when she reports the story, she puts that Joe Esposito is the best man. She does not make any co-best man distinction. And I would assume that's because it's just too difficult to explain in a short magazine article why there's two co-best man, or why so, because normal people would think of that as a best man and a groomsman. And we got a big shot here. And Luann, we got two cooks in this one. I see two cook hats. I also see a whole lot of waiters. And this is basically the staff of the Aladdin Hotel who's made this all possible. Who's caring for all of Elvis's 100 guests who are serving at this banquet. You can see the train, not the train exactly, but the front of Priscilla's dress, and you can see that it must extend into a long train. It's got a lot of fabric spread out on the floor. It's at least as wide as the tablecloth on the table that's holding the 5 or 6 tier cake. I'm not sure if that's a tier at the top. Might just be a decoration. But I think it was just so Elvis that he gave all of these people this moment to take this picture with him, and he looks just delighted with the whole thing. He's got the biggest smile on his face, and there's a guy a couple of people away from him with glasses on, and it looks like the happiest moment of his life as well. A lot of the others don't look extremely happy or excited to be here, but a few of them do. There's some true excitement shining through a few faces. But Elvis is very, very happy. And Colleen says that maybe George went to take a nap. He looked pretty tired. He did. When we saw him, he looked pretty tired. And Luann says that being a teenager in the mid-70s, she didn't know of Priscilla or the wedding at all. But maybe she was too much of a kid then, looking on at the magazines. It might not even I'm registered with you because you weren't really thinking about marriage at the time. Those girls who saw Elvis as eligible, though, every one of them knew. The next day or later this day, they all knew. They knew quickly. Everybody in the fan clubs. And Marion says it seems to be a picture of the whole staff. It must have been a great moment for those guys. There's a lot of them that are very young in this picture. Some of the waiters, at least I believe they're young, and I think they may not have realized what an amazing moment this is. But if they had this picture later, that they must have told this story a million times. Yeah, I was at Elvis's wedding. This is me right here. I mean, I would have told it a million times. Now, Albert Goldman, he's the writer who doesn't like Elvis, just despises Elvis. But it's always good to get this, other viewpoint in here. And he got most of his information from Lamar Fike and some others that Lamar got to come in and interview with Albert, or that they interviewed with Lamar himself. And Albert says, the guest included the Colonel's staff and many of his business colleagues. Well, we've heard that from Marty. And that's one of the things that I really want to highlight during this series, is that when we read a book by Albert Goldman, or even Peter Guralnick, or Alana Nash, or anyone that wasn't there, it's different with the guys. They're giving us their recollections. But the other people, they're synthesizing information. They don't have any special sources of knowledge other than the interviews that they go out to gather themselves. Those would be new sources of knowledge. But in a lot of cases, these people have told these stories so many times, you're basically just having it retold to you. But earlier in the Elvis journey, when they were gathering these stories, very important. Interviews are still super, super important. They do go out and they gather source material, but that's like newspapers and magazines and television interviews of the day. And then they synthesize that into their own words and then tell us something. And then a lot of people take that as the truth, but it's not the truth. It's their interpretation of a lot of facts that are put together. And a lot of those facts are things that other people said. Now, they were people that were there, but that doesn't mean that what they said was a fact. The fact is that they said it, but it doesn't mean that the information contained in the statement is fact. That requires further verification. Although we do have to sometimes just put our trust in them and take it at face value. But none of these guys, anybody who's writing after the fact, all of this is a lot of their opinion mixed in. And what I'm trying to do is strip all of that away. And we look at source material like this picture, like the statements that Marty made. And then we see, hey, Albert Goldman says almost the same thing. Well, yeah, he read Marty's statement and then he's restated it. But he hasn't given us as much detail as Marty gave. He didn't tell us it was RCA executives. He didn't tell us it was movie executives. He didn't tell us that it was Hill and Range people. These are not business colleagues of the Colonel. The way Albert says this is, it's the Colonel's staff. Well, that's true. There's some Colonel staff here. These people were personal friends of Elvis. Now, they weren't the best of friends, but they're people like Tom Diskin. These are people who make a major contribution to Elvis's well-being on a daily basis. They make the machine run that Elvis is the head of that brings in the money. They are very important to Elvis, and Elvis does love these people. He spent a lot of time with Tom. So when we say it's the Colonel's staff, yeah, people that Elvis knows and he works with and that he respects. And many of the Colonel's business colleagues is the way Albert's putting it. Colonel's staff and many of his business colleagues. Well, these aren't the Colonel's business colleagues. These are the people who have contracts with Elvis and they are paying Elvis. And so these are it's like if you were going to invite your boss to your wedding. A lot of people do that. It's a sign of respect. Elvis has made a lot of money from these people and he respects them. And the Colonel makes sure that they get invited. So I don't know. Yes, the Colonel does business with them. Yes, they are colleagues of the Colonel, but the Colonel wouldn't be doing any business with them if there was no Elvis. It's Elvis that does business with these people. And Albert Goldman goes on and he says, they did not include such Presley stalwarts as Lamar Fike and Sonny West. Well, that does sound terrible. Why is Sonny West and Lamar Fike not at this wedding? And Albert says both of whom learned about the marriage through the media. Well, that sounds even worse. Sonny, a good friend of Elvis at this time, and Lamar Fike, one of his dearest and oldest friends, not invited to the wedding? And they just hear about it through the media? Well, what Peter Guralnick says, and so he's gotten this information from somewhere, from one of these guys, same way that Albert did, but Albert worded his in a special way. Peter, I think he's working with exactly the same information. He just gives us more of it. And Peter says Lamar and Alan, who is Alan Fortas, which is strange because Jerry Schilling told us that Alan Fortas was expected to attend the wedding, but not go to the ceremony, which indicated that he was at the hotel. And one of the guys that was told, you're not coming. You're not going to be in the wedding ceremony. Well, what Peter says is Lamar Fike and Alan Fortas were omitted simply because they were not part of the group that was in California. In other words, Alan wasn't invited because he's working at the Circle G Ranch. And he's got some personal issues he's working on out there. And he's fairly newly married himself. And it's not clear if he wasn't invited or it was determined it would be best if he continued to work at the ranch. But I think that one would probably be a special case. Now, Lamar, I don't know where Lamar's at, but he's not around, and therefore he couldn't get there to go to the wedding. And Sonny West. Well, Sonny West is currently making a movie in Hollywood, and that's why he can't be there. It's not that he's not invited. He's choosing to move forward with this movie career. And so it was already scheduled. And he couldn't come. But Albert makes it sound like, this was added on top of Red not being able to attend the ceremony and some of the other guys. But it wasn't. Completely unrelated. Just logistical. Here's a picture of Elvis and Priscilla cutting this wedding cake again, but this one's in some color. I have no idea if this color is correct. It looks like somebody colorized a black and white picture to me, because his outfit's coming out a little purple, Elvis's tux, and it should really, I believe, be black satin like we've seen, or a silky black look. And Colleen says, wasn't Sonny making a movie? Yes, he was. And Luann's asking, are there any bridesmaids at this wedding at all? It seems to be all fellers. That's interesting. You noticed that. I didn't pick up on that, but you're right. We haven't seen a lot of women. Joni Esposito is the matron of honor. Priscilla's sister Michelle is the maid of honor. I don't think there's a third. But Dee Presley is here. And Luann says that she's not used to having cake makers nearby. But at least they should have taken their caps off during the picture. Yeah, maybe they should have. I mean, they were inside. Now, this is a picture of a champagne bottle from that room during the reception. And you can see it says California champagne, which means it is not champagne at all. It is sparkling wine, or whatever they call that when they can't call it champagne, because champagne is from a specific region of France. But the Aladdin didn't mind calling it California champagne to make it sound a little fancier. I think kind of like, I think it's Miller that's called the champagne of beer. But it's absolutely not champagne either. And Luann saying that Terry had a live that started before mine. Did he? I did not see him on. I'll have to go watch his replay. Everybody be sure to check out Elvis History with Terry. And I wonder where Terry's at. Usually he's here for the afternoon show. I think it's like 8 o'clock his time right now. And here's Elvis feeding Priscilla a piece of that cake that they cut. I think the colors in this one are far more accurate. And it looks like the roses on the cake, the icing roses, were very, very red. And you can see that, like on Priscilla's cake, I think she separated the rose off of the piece. I'm assuming those are iced roses. And my recollection is that before like 1995 or so, that if you used a red dye, a food coloring of red, that the end product was incredibly bitter to the point that you did not want to eat it. And I think it was far worse in the 60s. So my guess is they don't want to eat those red roses because they don't taste good. Now the white icing, it tastes incredible. But the red icing, you did not want to get near. One year I got a Spider-Man cake for my birthday. It was like Spider-Man's face. I was so excited because I love Spider-Man. Covered in red icing, and therefore it was unedible. Well, Luann, there's no bridesmaids in this one either. It looks like we got a picture of Elvis and Priscilla, and Vernon is standing next to Elvis. Vernon has gone from a very happy person that we saw in an earlier picture in a previous episode, and now he does not look happy at all. Like maybe this whole thing's drug on too long by this point. Now, I believe we're into this by less than an hour at the point this picture is being taken. Like that includes the ceremony, right? In less than 2 hours since they've been at the hotel getting ready. Something like that. And down, kneeling in front of them, is Joe Esposito and Charlie Hodge. And they are next to the cake. I'm going to guess this was taken before they cut that piece of cake. Don't really know, but that's my guess. And Luann says it's hard to figure out Elvis and Priscilla and the wedding moments. It's like jigsaw puzzle trying to put the pieces together. Yep, it sure is. And Elvis is looking at the camera. Vernon is looking slightly off camera, I believe. I have no idea where Charlie's looking. He's way off to the right of the picture. He's looking way off to the right. Joe is looking at somebody maybe around where Charlie's looking at him, but I think they're maybe a little closer. Elvis is looking right at the camera, and Priscilla directly into the camera. Well, but it looks like George didn't go take that nap we thought he might have made. He showed up in this picture. And I actually happen to know everybody in this picture based on a caption that was with it. And Colleen says that Charlie's looking at the cake. That does sound like Charlie. He probably was thinking about that cake. Now, in this picture, over at the left, let's start over there. Now, at the far left, Luann, there's another guy with a hat on back there. I'm guessing he's serving food or cooking something, but he's back there. But he's not really supposed to be in this picture. And then the first guy we actually see, that's Richard Davis. So Richard Davis would often stand in for Elvis in the movies. I think something had happened, and Richard had been injured by Elvis and was not able to do the stand-in parts for Clambake, but he was there for the filming. I can't remember the exact story. It was something like, I can't remember now. We told it in a previous episode, though. So don't let my memory stand in the way between you and that story. It's back there, somewhere in this series about Circle G. But it's Richard Davis. The guy next to Richard Davis is Jerry Schilling. And you can see how tall Jerry is. But if you look at their feet and you look at Richard Davis's feet, he's wearing some boots and they've got some heels on him. But if you look at Jerry's feet, he's got some higher heels, some taller heels. And that might explain why he's slightly taller than Richard Davis. He's also got a good looking head of hair. Next to Jerry Schilling, and all these men are wearing, I believe they're dark suits. It's a black and white picture, so it's hard to say. But dark suits with thin ties, I believe they're all wearing cowboy boots, which is probably, it's hearkening back to the Circle G, because all these guys have been out there at the Circle G. Now, George Klein, who is next to Jerry Schilling, I think he might also be wearing cowboy boots. Not absolutely positive. And he did not ride any horses, I don't think. At least Elvis didn't buy him a horse. He might have rode some out there, though. And so he might have got into the cowboy look. I know most of them were wearing cowboy clothes, so he probably had a pair of boots. Now, next to George Klein, and George has a huge smile on his face, you can still see the circles under his eyes, but they don't look nearly as bad in this picture. Next to George Klein is Joe Esposito, and you can see Joe appears to be wearing cowboy boots. Joe's also wearing cufflinks. Oh, and I'm coming back to Richard. He's got a heck of a nice ring on his pinky finger, on his right hand. Joe's also wearing a pinky ring finger. Now, in between George and Joe, there's a face. And that face is Freddie Bienstock. And he's with Hill and Range. So he's one of these guys that the Colonel's invited, that is not one of the inner circle, but he is a very important person to Elvis. Now, Elvis and Priscilla are next in the picture. It's Priscilla, then Elvis. And again, this must be a posed picture because the bottom of Priscilla's dress is carefully arranged. And they're all kind of standing around it. Now, Charlie Hodge, he's looking right at Priscilla. His focus is on her entirely. Richard Davis, he's looking at the camera. Jerry is looking off to the side at somebody else. George is looking right at the camera. Freddie Beanstalk is looking right at the camera. Joe is looking right at the camera. Priscilla is looking right at the camera. Elvis is looking right at the camera. Charlie is looking at Priscilla. And the guy next to Charlie is Marty Lacker. And he's looking at the camera as well. So George was there. Marty Lacker was there. Even if May Mann didn't happen to notice him. And maybe this is why she didn't notice him. They're over here taking pictures with Elvis. And Marion says that Elvis's shoes look good in this picture. Billy did a great job. They do, and it just makes you wonder, like, I don't want to say that the story is not true. But I kind of wonder if it is true. It'd be a rough story to make up, though, so I have to believe it's true. That he tried to turn a pair of suede shoes into something that would look appropriate with this tux, which would have been patent leather, which were the shoes Elvis was supposed to have. There is kind of a shine on his shoes in this picture, though, so maybe he found patent leather shoes somewhere else in the hotel. Or maybe Billy did do that good a job. I don't know. And Marion saying, is it Richard Davis that's standing up Priscilla's wedding dress? No, that is Jerry Schilling. But that's okay. Jerry Schilling and Priscilla become, strong friends later in life. Despite him getting his dirty cowboy boot all over her nice, clean, white wedding dress because he was definitely stepping on it. And Luann says that she didn't know Priscilla's dress spread out like that on the floor. It's got a 7-foot train, Luann. Elvis and Michelle had to help hold it to get her into this room. And she said, Luann says, I thought her dress was really straight at the top part of the dress. But it must really be heavy too, because it's got so much fabric dragging it down. But that is where we're going to have to end this episode. We've maybe cut the cake and Elvis has started to eat. I don't think we got our piece, though. So we're going to have to get our piece of cake in tomorrow's episode. And until then, I'm going to leave you again with my brand new song about the wedding, Christina at Midnight, which refers to the plane owned by Frank Sinatra, flown by Danny Kaye, that brought Elvis and Priscilla here to the Aladdin, but it also talks about Red and how a brother got rolled over by the wedding machine. And until I see you all again, y'all keep on taking care of business. This is Christina at Midnight.
With a bullhorn harp over stucco walls where the flashbulbs stop. Joni's got curlers, Joe's got the cash, Danny Kaye's in the cockpit, burning jet fuel fast. Sinatra's bird, she's purring like a prayer. Christina's wings cut the desert air. Red's not on the list, he's pacing the floor, while the collar's got the press in a ballroom wall. Rona's got a sin and a Polaroid grin, but the ring's in a case with the diamonds grinning in. $15 for a license and a brother got burned by the wedding machine. Palm Springs whispers, Berlin's got the suit, but the real show's hidden in a velvet beat. Mama's flown in, daddy's eyes are wide, while the Memphis boys are split on the right. Livich opens up his velvet chest, bullhead cufflinks, diamonds in the west. But Red's got a wound that won't sit still, he's shouting down love from the windowsill. Color's got a script and a phantom plan, he's dealing out silence with a sleight of hand. You got too many, he says with a grin. Let go of the love if you wanna win. Blinded by the fight, ran up like a bow in the Vegas night. Blinded by the fight, when the heartbreak hits you the motor line. Oh, we were flying on a secret street to a chapel dream, but the brother got burned by the wedding machine. Christina's wheels kissed the tarmac clean, and the ring was slipped before the world had seen. But love, oh love, it don't run on time, it breaks in the silence now.